Hello everyone, I'm Tonya from Shattered Bones, and today I'm going to be reading you another one of my blogs from my website at shatteredbones.com. You're welcome to go there and read them for yourself, but people seem to enjoy me reading them and telling them a little more about it as I go. This one is called The Belt. I wrote it December 19th, 2020, so last year. Right before my birthday. My birthday is December 20th. It didn't take long before my mother started using my father to beat me as well. She would call him at the bar and tell him stories of how terrible I had been all day, leaving out the fact that she had been brutalizing and torturing me. She failed to mention most of my day was spent hiding underneath the bed, under the stairs in the basement, in a closet, in the woods, or hidden under dirty piles of clothes. I can remember so many times holding my breath when she walked by and I was under the clothes, and I would lay as flat as I could and throw as many dirty clothes as I could on top of me. I remember holding my breath when she walked by for fear she would see the pile of clothes moving, because if she found me while she was in a rage, she would beat me savagely. My sister would help her search for me. It was a sick and twisted game of hide and go seek. The majority of my childhood was spent hiding and fearing for my life. It quickly became a mob mentality in my family. My sister eventually got so bad that she would pinch herself or scratch herself to make marks on herself and cry for our mom. She could turn those tears on and off. And she'd say, "Mom, Tonya hurt me." And she did that just to watch my mom beat me. It gave her great power. I learned early on to just give my sister anything she wanted. Otherwise, she would basically sick my mom on me. My sister fell into the golden child role perfectly. I had become the official family scapegoat by the tender age of 8. I remember endlessly trying to reason with my father about how brutally they treated me through the day. My mom would speak loudly over top of me, claiming I was jealous of my sister. That was the year that they made up the jealous song. And all three of them, my mother, my father, and my sister, would sing it anytime I tried to express my feelings, speak up for myself, or explain how mean they were being to me. It was sung to the tune of Yankee Doodle, and they would simply say, "Jealous, jealous, 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 jealous." Just even thinking about that and hearing that just boils my blood. I would get so frustrated by all three of them. It was incredibly dismissive. I'm just adding in here. But I can remember like so many things happening, and I would just be like trying to reason with my father because he seemed to be the most rational of all of them to me. So I basically, would be trying to plead for somebody to listen to me and believe me, somebody that supposedly loved me. And instead of being listened to and heard, I was dismissed and made fun of. And, it just hurt me more. I would get so frustrated by all three of them singing and dismissing anything I had to say or any of my feelings or emotions that I would start to cry. And that made them all laugh hysterically. The song became another way for them to torture me more, and I discovered by this tender age that there was absolutely no justice in my world. I was doomed to be ridiculed, belittled, scorned, and used by all kinds of cruel people who claimed to love me. There was no joy in my young life. My mom's most vengeful days, I would be in my room, and I would hear her on the phone, and she would be talking to an aunt, a niece, a cousin, or any gossiping ear who would listen. And she would speak to one person, get all the scoop from them that she could, ask them all kinds of questions, and then she would call the next person to disclose all of the personal and private information that she had just discovered. And growing up listening to this, I thought that's the way friendships worked, because what else did I have to look at or know from? I can't think of one single person who my mother hasn't spoken poorly of. I mean, she lies all the time to their face. She's all light and happy and sweet and fun. And as soon as they're out of her sight or earshot, she's putting them down to someone else. I guarantee it. Any of my cousins who have children that are not neurotypical, my cousins worship my mother. If they knew how she spoke about their children and them, half-breeds, then they would think twice. I mean, I can't think of one person, none, even my sister, that she didn't speak bad about behind her back. It's definitely an insidious disease that she has. Many days I would hear her complaining about my father. I could hear her say how unhappy she was in the marriage. She would bawl. I mean, that was one thing she'd do. She would also turn on the tears and just cry, and make people pity her and feel sorry for her. And I could hear her say how unhappy she was and that she hated him and she was never satisfied. He never satisfied her sexually. And I remember being torn between being afraid that they would get a divorce and wishing that they would. Those days, Mother would get herself all worked up into a huge rage. Then she would slam that phone down. And those were the days I didn't have to call the bar. Normally, I would have to call the bars to find my father. But she'd slam the receiver down, and then I'd hear her talking to several different people, and the phone hanging up again, and then the rotary dialing again and clicking back. And each bar she called would make her more angry. Finally, I could hear her speaking to my father, and I would hear her say, "You need to come home immediately. Tonya has been giving me a hard time all day, and you need to take care of her. I can't handle her anymore." And my stomach would just drop. And my sister, who's sitting right next to me in our room with playing Barbies, looks up at me with that little sideways smirk. And she said, "You're going to get the belt again." And then she'd giggle. I hated my life. I had been doing nothing but playing with my toys quietly in my room, the same as my sister. I stayed as far away from my mother as possible. Every single day, that was my goal. But it didn't matter. No one would believe me. No one would listen to my side. My feelings didn't matter. Nothing I thought or said mattered. As soon as I heard that, I knew I had to get ready. Hiding didn't work with my dad. I had to take my beatings. He had very strict rules. It's almost ritualistic the way that he handled it. I had witnessed him beating my mom way too many times, and I didn't want that to happen to me. My father is from a 5th generation of strict German descent. I always thought it was 5 generations, and I did the family tree. I traced their German heritage back to the 1600s. So when I say strict descent, I mean my great-grandfathers 5 times removed were from Prussia. But they're all very, I trace it back to Rosicrucian times. And all of my father and his father and grandfathers are all big into Freemasons, KKK, those kind of things. And that's the part of the town I live in. The Grand Dragon of the KKK lives in the town that I live in for decades in the state. So, yeah. And my father always had the Confederate flag hanging at our house. The Confederate flag hanging before the American flag. So, I didn't know what that meant. I just always knew it was part of our family. So anyway, it was imperative that each family member marry a full-blooded German. My father was at least a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. I personally have been studying it, and I believe that that most people are just Freemasons, no big deal. But I also believe that there are secret societies within those secret societies once you get into the higher echelon of things. And I'm intelligent and my father's intelligent. My mother and my sister, they're they don't, how do you say that? My mother dropped out of school in the 8th grade. If my sister got a C in a class, the whole house would celebrate. And I had to have straight A's. If I got a B, I would get a beating because I was smart and I knew better. And that never made sense to me. I remember a large gold ring he wore with a double-headed eagle on it. He was a worshipful master, and he wrote God on many of his possessions. I remember asking him why he had God on everything, and it would be G-O-D in great big letters. It was on his beer cooler, it was on his lunchbox, anything that was his, he'd write God on it. And I thought that was strange. And he said it stands for good old Dale. But no, I don't believe that. I believe he said that so that he didn't seem so cuckoo. But he did think very highly of himself back then. I mean, I could see him thinking he's some kind of a god. For the next few minutes or hours, I did nothing but lay in my bunk bed. I had a top bunk, and I would lay in the fetal position, feeling sick to my stomach. I was impatiently waiting for my next beating. The swishing sound of the car pulling into the gravel driveway was a huge trigger for me. That is my signal. My heart began pumping really fast. My sister comes skipping down the hallway and pop her head into my bedroom, gleefully awaiting my torture. She would have a big smile, and she peered in our room at me and said, "Tonya, get out of bed. Dad's here for you now." And I could hear my mother shouting in her high-pitched voice. She was always happy when she was eating or when I was being brutalized. And I could hear her in her high-pitched voice sounding almost giddy, "Tonya, your precious father is here for you." Everyone was excited for his arrival. Everyone except me. I slowly got down off the top bunk as I heard the front door swinging open and loudly banging into the wall. My heart began to pound harder as I heard the metal clicking sound of his belt buckle unbuckling. I slipped quietly. I got down my bed, slid right into his bedroom. That's to the right of mine. And then I would hear him stepping and snapping his leather belt together. And with each step down the hallway, he was calling my name and saying words with every single snap. "Bones, snap! You know you have to mind your mother, snap! You know what's coming, snap!" When I'd hear that leather, I would jump. And I was in his room waiting with my little hands folded in front of me and my head down. As always, he demanded I strip completely. "Get your clothes off. You should have had that done already," he shouted. So I slowly took off my shoes, my pants, and then my panties, and my shirt. The psychologist calls this covert incest. I remember my dad smelling like beer. And he ritualistically, he was very predictable. And that was, I think, another reason why I love my father, because my mother was unpredictable, but my father was predictable. I mean, as mean and brutal as he was, I knew what was coming with him. So he always sat on the side of the bed facing the dresser. I had to lay across his lap with the left side of my body touching his waist. My father was predictably cruel. The leather belt struck me on the right side of my body. When the belt torture first began, I was maybe 5 years old, that I remember. I instinctively started putting my hands behind my back. And my father calmly said, "Bones, every time you move, you're going to get another strike. You get to decide when this beating stops by staying still." And after a while, I learned how to stay still really fast. I could will myself to remain still during the beatings. I could still scream and cry in pain without moving a muscle. Eventually, he told me again, "Bones, if you make a peep, I will keep hurting you." You decide. You decide how long it lasts. Now that was hard. So after years of weekly torture, by the age of 7 to 8 years old, I discovered a way to block out the physical pain. I somehow learned to leave my tiny little body. I could see myself from above. I was floating behind my father and myself. I was oddly floating in the air and looking down at my little naked body while I was being beaten and abused. My body was limp, not moving a muscle or making a sound. I felt sad and relieved at the same time. Couldn't understand, why am I up here and why am I not feeling that? But the amazing part was that the beatings and the molestations no longer physically hurt me while it was happening. But afterwards, like when the beating would stop, I'd pop back in my body, and then the welts and the bleeding marks and the pain was still strongly evident. I remember my groin throbbing to the point where it was even difficult to walk. I remember how rough the clothes felt, rubbing on my welts and cuts from the beatings with the belt. I remember the bruising all over me and having to wear long pants under a dress to hide the bruises on my legs, or long sleeves if it was in the times when I was putting my hands behind my back. I mean, I think that's why he made me lay still, because he didn't want visible marks where people could see them. Around the age of 8 to 9, I first became suicidal. I began to actively seek ways to end my life, and I never told anyone about this, because who would I tell? The doctor already suspected and knew. I mean, he would tell my mother at doctor's appointments when she was bitching and complaining about how awful I was, he would say, "You're going to kill that little girl one day. You need to control yourself. You're going to kill that little girl one day." Heard him say it more than once, and then he'd give her nerve pills. He would have reported her today. My teachers and pastor, if I tried to talk to them, they told me, honor your father and mother. Whatever your father and mother say, that's what you do. I grew up in a Christian school where children were paddled with a wooden board daily. It had holes drilled in it. And I can remember them coming in from a beating, and they'd have bruises all over them, all over their hands. Their hands would be swelled up, and where they put their hand back there, and it would be busted and bleeding, and they'd walk in and their head down, hold it up. It wasn't unusual. There was no safe place for me. Our bus driver had a paddle on the bus. I was terrified all the time. I remember the children in school coming in from beating with bruises all over them. I could trust no one. Imagine being only 8 and wanting to die. Being an unloved child does that to you. This year is also when the orthopedic surgeon found my pronounced 48-degree scoliosis curve. I'll put a picture of what that looks like here. It was 48 degrees and I was only 8. I was hospitalized for my nerves for a week. They called it my nerves because they did all kinds of upper GI, lower GI, because I was constantly vomiting and missing too much school. Even when I was sitting in class, I didn't even feel, it was, I'm sure, anxiety. I didn't even feel it coming up, and I would just puke all over my desk, and the teachers got tired of it. They were sick of it. So they said, you have to get her tested. So the doctor put me in the hospital and did all these invasive tests that felt like molestation again, sticking things in every hole I had. And I remember being in the hospital as young as I was, and I think my mother stayed one day, and she was so bored. So I was in the hospital all alone. The nurses felt really bad for me, and they would come in and be kind, but I just cannot imagine leaving my child alone in a hospital because I was bored, but that's what happened. I'm having things inserted into parts of me, and I'm all by myself. So, yeah, this tells you a little bit about what kind of mother she was. So the x-ray they ordered for the lower GI uncovered my severe spinal curve. I distinctly remember this because at the time that I wrote this blog, I did not realize I was a DID system, dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder wrongly. So I didn't know that. So when I have these flashbacks or memories, it is as if it's really happening. I can hear the doctor. I can see my mother. I can see my father. I can see me. I see everything that's happening. I can see my x-ray. When I get these memories back. And I was getting these back years ago when I started writing Shatterbones, but I didn't realize it was a dissociative part of me telling me this stuff. I just knew that suddenly I had this memory that I had suppressed for 50 years. It's just insane. So, I distinctly remember the orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Khan. He was Dr. Khan the father. There's a Dr. Khan the son now. Asking my parents if I had been in a serious car accident or bicycle accident. Did I fall out of a tree? He was going through all these traumatic things. What happened to her? What happened to this little girl? She wasn't born this way. How did her back get so severe that she needs surgery right now? If she wasn't born this way, something happened to her. I remember the doctor just being really angry. And he said, and my father and mother, no, nothing happened to her. Nothing happened to her. And the doctor distinctly said, a serious or repetitive injury is the absolute only thing that would cause this little girl's spine to be so severely deformed at this age. My lower spine was curving to the left side of my body, growing away from the right side that fucker beat me on. I'm still pretty pissed about this because I was always told, you were just born with this scoliosis. Well, I might have had scoliosis because 2 of my sons have it slightly, just a slight curve, but to have a curve as severe as mine, he beat me to the point that my bones moved away from those injuries. That's fucked up. And he didn't go to prison for that. He beat me to the point that I dissociated. And he didn't go to prison for that. I'm disabled. It's affected me physically, emotionally, mentally. My adrenal system shut down. So it wasn't just my mother. My father did more damage to me than my mother did, I believe. Yeah, I'm pissed. I knew the cause. I knew it was the belt. I was a little kid, and I knew, and so did my family. But my parents remained adamant. No such injury happened to her. She's never been hurt. And they refused to give me appropriate treatment. That would be medical neglect now. Absolute medical neglect. I was molested because of their neglect. I should have been removed from that house at age 3. They shouldn't have had children. My parents refused to give me the surgery. Spinal surgery with a Harrington rod was required. Without this life-saving surgery, the doctor said right in front of me, I would be wheelchair bound before the age of 30. He said the curve will worsen to the point where it will affect my ability to breathe. And it has worsened so much more. I mean, it used to just be a curve at the bottom of my spine, and it curved to the right, and now it's an S curve, and it just, it curves all the way on the bottom, all the way on the right. I've lost like 6 or 7 inches of height. It's bad. I'm still walking though, because I'm badass like that. I was in a wheelchair for a little bit, but fuck them. So yeah, I was a wheelchair, then I used a walker, and then a cane, and now I ambulate freely without any assistance. So yeah, take that. I don't know how long it'll last, but whatever. I enjoy walking right now because I can. He even stated that I may be unable to have children without the surgery. But my father said, well, I'm not paying for that. He told the doctor, if she needs some kind of surgery, she's going to have to pay for that herself as an adult. And I remember the doctor saying, this is 6 months of being bedbound in a body cast. This is a huge surgery. She's going to need help with this. He said, that's not my problem. My dad said, that's not my problem. What else can we do that's cheaper? And the doctor said, we could do a brace, but the brace isn't going to help her. So the doctor said, this needs to be taken care of while I'm still growing. It's imperative. And my father refused. He did allow a torturous Boston back brace that caused my skin to bleed. Excoriated my skin so bad, and my father would lay the doctor told him, this is not going to correct her curve. The only thing it possibly may do is keep it from getting worse, but we're going to have to make it so uncomfortable for her that what we're doing to her is not worth, hurting her, because it's not going to help her. That is not the treatment that she needs. But my father refused. He had to act like he was doing something. So, despite this doctor explaining my condition was far too advanced for a back brace to do anything except torture me, I was forced to wear that 23 hours a day. I remember the doctor stating my scoliosis was so severe the brace could possibly prevent it from getting worse, but that I was going to need a new back brace every few months, and surgery was the only solution for me. Well, once my father found out I needed a back brace every few months at $1,000, guess what? I only had one brace. But I wore that brace 23 fucking hours a day, through the summer, through everything. And he would lay me on the couch, stick his knee in my back, tighten that Velcro as tight as he could, and slam it down on me and remind me, you're going to wear this fucking brace. I paid $1,000 for this goddamn thing, and you're going to wear it. And I would not be allowed to take it out except for the 1 hour a day that I showered. And this is another fun fact. My father forced me and my sister to shower with him the whole time I lived there. When we were real little, we used a tub. But when we got old enough, he said it was wasting water to put water in the tub. So he took a shower with me and my sister all the way through high school with me. I remember being mortified when I had to strip in front of him and I was developing breast and pubic hair and going through that. It was awful, but I had to do it. Me, my sister, my father showered together all the way through 18, and I moved out of that house. And now as an adult, I think back on that because he worked at I&M, and he would take a shower at work because he was in maintenance. He took a shower at work because he worked in coal bins and stuff, and he was always dirty. He did not need to come home and take a shower again, but he did. My mother would sit upstairs because she was too big to get up and down the steps. And she knew my father was downstairs taking showers with me and my sister, and she allowed that shit to happen. That's how messed up these people are. Sorry, I went on a tangent. The back brace cost my father $1,000, and I was told to be grateful. The one good thing about the back brace was that my mother could no longer hit me with her hands, because whenever she did, I remember one time her hit me really, really hard, and she had like bruises all over her knuckles, and it was like bleeding, and I looked at her and I was just like, whoa. So, I remember trying to run away from her one time and her hitting me, and then she screamed in pain. And it caused me to pause a little because the brace became a strange sort of body armor for me. It was hurting me in one way and causing my skin to bleed underneath. But it was protecting me in another way. And that brace was very symbolic of my relationship with my parents. On one hand, they gave me a room and board and fed me. And they would tell me they loved me every night. And they said, they loved me and they were supposed to be good for me. Yet on the other hand, they tortured me daily. It was very confusing. And an unloved child, this is something I'm adding in, will not stop loving the parents. They stop loving themselves. That's why I was suicidal at 8. I thought I was as bad as they told me I was. I thought that for 50-something years. I'm not. I have a more loving heart than all of them combined, and they know it, and they hate that about me. They hate my light. They hate that I am genuine and authentic, and they cannot be. A why not moment, which is Tonya spelled backwards. I always think it's how my life should have been in my childhood instead of what it really was. A why not moment. When a child isn't loved while growing up, they don't stop loving their family, they stop loving themselves. I became legally disabled in my 40s. My ACE score is 8 out of 10. Anything above a 3 is considered high. My ACE score should really be 10 out of 10. Had my father been arrested for the things that he did, it would have been 10 out of 10. My grandfather was arrested, and that's another story. And he ran over a 3-year-old little boy while he was drunk. Then I also have cousins that are in prison for molestation. I mean, this runs in generations. These sickos, it's on my mother and my father's side. So, and the other point I could have got is if my parents got a divorce. And obviously, I mean, he beat the shit out of my mom. They should have got a divorce. That would have put me at a 10 out of 10. So there you go. Prison and divorce were the two I had missing. And had I been living today, they would have had both. All of my debilitating diagnoses are directly related to the past trauma from my childhood and abuse by my toxic family of origin. Yet I'm the only family member who's in therapy. I'm the only one who has the courage and fortitude to speak out about these things. I thought once I left that hell they called home at the tender age of 18 that the abuse would be in my past. But I was so wrong. Survivors struggle for life. In here I put complex PTSD. I didn't know about the DID at this point. I didn't know about some of my other diagnoses, but DID is a huge one. It haunts complex PTSD and DID. It stays with you for eternity. Healthy parents would have protected their children above anything else. I guarantee you that if I saw my husband or somebody treating my children like that, oh, hell yeah, I'd have been out of there. And I'd have been calling the police on him. But he didn't protect me. He failed to protect me from her. He failed to protect me from himself. He failed. It's just all there is to it. So that's my story of the belt and my first memory of dissociation. You can really see the blue popping today. Kind of like it. Love y'all more.